And welcome, Brother Goodwin here, Crossing the Spotlight. I'm sitting here once again with Brother Gary Kah in the studio here. And Brother Gary, you've written some books, and we just had you on. Most folks just watched yesterday. If you missed yesterday's, this is Gary Kah from somewhere around Indianapolis, Indiana area.
That's right.
And he's written a couple books. Actually, quite a few years ago you wrote these books. But I think your book, Global Occupation, is more up to date today than it was when you wrote it. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, so much of what I was warning about back in those days is now happening. And so we've kept the book in print, and people are getting it now and giving it to relatives and friends saying, look, this was warned about 30 years ago. This guy had to know what he was talking about because now it's happening. And of course, I can't take credit for knowing that. It's just that because I was in the job that I was and the doors that the Lord opened, it gave me those insights and that information. And I was actually invited to join two different organizations that were part of this agenda. And the one organization, I reproduced some of their documents in the book. The other organization, at the time, I was in it for 7 years. The last 3 years, I had secret clearance. And so I had to be careful. I didn't mention it at the time that I wrote the book, but it actually helped give me the perspective to write the book the way that I did. Because some people have asked, why did you take the angle that you did and come to the conclusions that you did? And it was really because of my experiences in that second organization. So I became aware back in the 80s that there were people within our government, as well as prominent people overseas and in this country, in the business communities, that belonged to certain organizations that were pushing this one world agenda. And in my opinion, it would just be a matter of time till this would come to the forefront. And now's that time. They're going all out because they feel like they have most, or if not all, of the pieces in place. And so they're trying to make a mad dash to get it all done while they have the upper hand.
So you were working for the state of Indiana as a government employee in the Commerce Department. You were going to other countries bringing jobs or bringing commerce to your state of Indiana. Is that right?
That's right.
And through all that, you began to see things, I gather.
Yes, it started with the people at the embassies. They're the ones that set up my meetings when I traveled overseas. So I got to know quite a few of those people in the commercial sections of the embassies quite well. And also through them, some of the international business figures, first in the energy field and then also in the medical community. Those were two of the three main areas that I worked in trying to promote products from Indiana. And I learned, for example, I remember one of the first things that just stunned me when I discovered it. Of the 7 largest oil companies in the U.S. at the time, 4 of them were pretty much held by one family, or at least they had the controlling interest. And I had to know about that because part of my job was promoting coal from Indiana, exporting it overseas. And so if you're promoting coal, you have to know your competitor, which is oil, at least at that time it was. And so I learned all these interesting details. Then I found out that some of those people who were making all this money at the time were putting that into major foundations, and those foundations were helping to support this one world agenda. And so it was a complicated picture. It took me 6 years after I left my job to thoroughly research this and put all the pieces together and connect the dots.
You know, I don't know who took your place, but they brought windmills into Indiana. Have you been up 41 lately?
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness,
yeah.
It's like you're in a sci-fi show or something. There's thousands of them things.
Yeah.
I think they're awful.
Going up north of Lafayette too, there's about 10 miles of
Did you know
windmills.
They'll never pay for themselves? As long as they'll never turn and make enough energy to ever pay for what it costs.
They've been heavily subsidized by the
That's
federal
the first
government.
warning right there. If it's subsidized, that means they don't
Yeah.
pay for themselves.
Yeah.
Who is the? I want to say who's the idiot, but who's behind this crazy stuff?
Well,
Someone getting a kickback somewhere?
again, the whole climate change agenda is also one with the one world agenda, which seems like an oxymoron at first glance, because you say, okay, if some of the energy companies back in the 70s and 80s were funding the one world movement, then how would it be to their advantage if they promote alternative energy sources? Till you realize that some of those same companies are also behind that. And they're using the climate change agenda to scare people to death and tell them, look, we need to make all these major changes in the world. And by the way, part of that is empowering the UN to the point where they can call all the shots and tell us what to do, because they need to save the world. They need to save us from ourselves in the name of climate change.
So it doesn't matter if it costs more, if it don't pay for itself, or this or that, because the greater good is that we're all going to die if we don't save the planet. That's what they're saying.
One of the organizations I was in that I do mention in the book and reproduce some of their documents, they put out a list of 49 reasons for why we need a world government. Now, this was just for the members at the time. But of those 49 reasons, I think it was something like 13 or 14 of them, almost a third of them had to do with the environment or ecology. This was way back before the term global warming was even mentioned publicly. So,
well, when I was a teenager, it was global cooling in the 70s.
Yeah, it was.
You're probably old enough to remember that.
Yeah, I am.
How old are you?
I am 62.
Oh, you're older than me. I'm young.
I've got you beat.
I'm 61.
Well,
His wife's sitting over here.
I don't know if that means I'm any wiser being 1 year older, but
I don't know. We're both in the ministry. I'm not sure we're wise at all.
But anyway, back to the point. I knew back then that this whole climate change, global warming thing would be a big part of this one world agenda. The other parts would be we need to bring in a new global economic system because the current one is going to fail. They talked about that back then. And now with the whole COVID thing, the way things are going, and it's just a matter of time till the current global economy unravels.
I've been telling people for months, I believe a depression's coming. I believe we're not going to survive this. I believe it's part of the plan, but I believe that there's bad. I mean, you can already see it. You go to the grocery store. People tell you that there's not as many things on the shelf as
it's
there was
already
a year
begun.
ago.
Yeah, there's some major shortages.
Have you been
coming.
to the car lots lately?
Oh yeah, they're low.
That's because of the
Everything's
chips,
low.
right? They got trucks sitting.
Well,
at,
well, boats are backed up 2 months in some parts of the country, miles out into the ocean waiting to deliver.
I'm still waiting on that yacht that I ordered.
I assume you're kidding on that, right?
I'm kidding.
But also trains in
They
Chicago.
got a rubber raft coming, I think.
There you go. We invested in one of those too. That may be one of the better things we've ever done. But in Chicago, trains are backed up 25 miles for numerous reasons. But this whole situation we're in, it's a created problem. This is a created problem. I think this is true
on the West Coast. The container ships, there's hundreds of them out there.
Yeah. As far as the eye can see,
I was told it's because they didn't have enough people working on the docks. I mean, I don't know if that's true or not.
That's part of the problem, but it's bigger than that. And so what the powers that be want to do, that want to bring in this new global system, is they want to crash the current economy, or at least get it slowed down enough so that they can introduce the new global economic system. And so they're using COVID, they're using the climate change agenda, they're using unrest in the world, wherever it is, and they're proposing world government as the only solution to all of our problems. It's going to be the cure-all. Except when people buy into that, then the real problems start, because they're stepping into a huge deception.
So what in your mind, of course none of us knows for sure, but what in your mind is going to replace the paper money, the currency of the world?
Well, the World Health Organization has already set the stage. They're calling for contactless point of sales, meaning electronics, either smartphone or something else where you don't have to touch anything. And that's already coming in.
What about just putting
scanning.
something on my hands and scan on my forehead?
That's the next step.
Yeah, isn't it?
The
it's all
technology
falling
is
into
there.
place,
The technology is there. And within a few years, if not sooner, we'll see that. In fact, I know for sure that there are already experiments going on in West Africa regarding that very thing, where they're merging vaccines with digital technology and the technology of planting it actually on your body with your health records. And it would actually be a medium for purchasing or selling. So it's just around the corner. But again, people have to be brought to a point where they feel like this is the only viable solution. It has to sound good. And that's how these people work. They create a problem, then they come in with the solution on their terms. And if people are gullible enough, they buy into it.
That's America.
Yeah,
well, that's everybody, really.
America at this point, I think the church really had an opportunity still to take a significant stand back in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s. But when I was trying to wake people up back then, people didn't want to hear it. They thought, if this ever happens, it's 100 years off. I'm not going to have to worry about it. I'll be long gone. And now here it is. And now people are beginning to wake up. But the major power centers of government are controlled by globalists now who want to promote this agenda and get it done.
Now, do you think there's still another big catalyst that has to happen to push us the rest of the way? In your newsletter, I read something pretty interesting on that line. We're not going to get into the newsletter, but
well,
do you think there's another big thing coming that's going to push us the rest of the way?
There are a few things. I believe that one more major war, probably in the Middle East, that scares people to death. When people feel like the world's going to be destroyed and they need a solution. You know, if you look at it, World War I led to the forming of the League of Nations. First step toward world government. And then what happened after World War II? The UN was formed. A much bigger step toward global government. So it makes sense that if there's a third world war, it would result finally in taking the world into a full-blown world government.
Point.
So that's part of it on a political
League of
front.
Nations, 1918. And
UN,
then UN 48.
1945.
And then 2022 or 21, the world something.
Well, you look at what just happened in Afghanistan. You've got radicals now all the way from Pakistan through Afghanistan, through Iran, Iraq, Syria, right up a straight shot toward Israel. So what's going to hold them back? You know, the moment they feel they've got a straight shot without anyone else opposing them, they're going to take it. And they may be getting close to the point where they think that right now. So that's one thing. And then, of course, the whole climate change thing that's going on, natural catastrophes. They're blaming everything. Even earthquakes are being blamed now on climate change and global warming. I mean, anything that happens that involves nature, rather than even holding out the possibility that could this be the beginning of God judging certain nations, that's not even considered. It's because of global warming. Everything's because of global warming. So it's as if God is being denied the opportunity to even shake the world and say, hey, I'm getting your attention, because they're even circumventing that, saying it's all global warming. And then, of course, the global economy that we talked about. And if you hit people in the pocketbook and with health, do I need to say where we are right now with everything going on? All those are going to be reasons for why we need global government, a more empowered UN or a brand new organization beyond the UN that is a system of global government that oversees our health, our economy, the climate change, our political, and everything that's important to us. They're going to propose as they need to intervene and take care of it because it's getting so bad. And
the guys who stand up and say no or refuse to get into that system, they're going to be singled out. They're going to be the bad guys.
Well, that's right.
And I know we can't go into it here because this is YouTube, but I think folks know what we're talking about. You're gonna lose your rights to do anything. And I think the whole thing about, what did you call that, about money without touching? What did you call that?
Contactless point of sales.
It's already beginning.
It's coming.
You go to Sam's Club, you call ahead, you order, they come out, they put it in your car, and you stick your credit card through the window. And
well, Whole Foods up in the Seattle area, they announced a number of their stores are opening up with a complete scanning system where nothing else will be needed to scan individuals. They'll all have a digital ID type of thing, and they'll be able to make purchases simply through scanning, nothing else.
Tell us a little
that was
bit
just announced a couple months ago.
Tell us a little bit about your dad. In the last segment we did, I wanted to get to that. I read about your dad a little bit. I know he's 90.
He's going to be 90 in a few weeks.
And he's not, he's been going through some health issues, of course, at 90. But what I found fascinating was his story of coming out of a Russian nation, was it? Or?
He grew up in Croatia when it was still a free nation, and then the partisans came in, who later became known as the communists. And on very short notice, they fled. They formed a wagon train with some relatives and neighbors.
What decade are we talking here?
Well, that was in 43, I believe.
Okay. So while World War II is going on.
Yes, during World War II. And there was no good direction to go in, because you had the Nazis over here, you had the communists over here. They just tried to survive. And sometimes they passed through towns right after the fighting took place.
He's a teenager at this time.
He was 12 when they fled. And they lost everything they had except for a few suitcases of clothes and a few pots and pans. That's it. They had to abandon their farm and left everything. Then they found a pocket of safety, they thought, in the mountains of Austria. And Dad was put in a boarding school there, and after a couple months, he started thinking, you know, I'm not learning a lot of math or anything else, but we're sure doing a lot of marching. And then one day he walked by the headmaster's office and the door was open.
And he learned the truth.
He overheard him talk to the second-in-command guy of what they're doing with these young, now he was 13 years old, 13 to 16-year-olds. They were basically preparing them to put them on the Eastern Front as cannon fodder for Hitler. As long as you could speak German or understand it, which my dad could. And so Dad thought, I didn't flee from the communists to now be working for Hitler on the Eastern Front. So that night, he and a friend jumped out of a 2-story window and ran for their lives. And he had to hide for weeks at a time. Hid out in the barn of a neighbor after running about 20 miles or so from the boarding school where he was. And then it wasn't too long after that the war ended. But he went through a lot, never dreamed he'd live to see the day where similar kinds of things are beginning to unfold in this country.
So when did he get to America?
He came to America in the 50s. So after the war, he and his cousins...
So now he's close to 18,
90.
20?
Yeah, he's going to be 90 in
No, I mean,
in
when
November.
he came, he was like 19 years old?
No, he was in his 20s.
20s.
He was in his 20s, yeah. Because he had an uncle that lived in the Dayton, Ohio area.
Did he speak about what it felt like to get here from where he came from?
Well, at first he was shocked because nothing went right. You know, a lot of people come here for the American dream and they realize they've got to start at the bottom. So when they arrived in New York, my mom and dad,
The 50s, right?
they were on a garbage strike. So they saw
no.
trash piled up 20 feet high everywhere, and they're thinking, man, did we make the right move? Or, you know, but they finally got to Dayton, and after 6 or 8 months, then he was able to, the job that was promised him fell through. So they ended up living in the basement of an uncle for an extended period of time. Didn't have it very easy, but then he did get a job and gradually learned the language. And he has a work ethic second to none. I mean, it's off the charts. And so, you know, whatever he did, he always did to the best of his ability and succeeded. And so then eventually I came along. I was born in Dayton and grew up in Kettering, Ohio. And again, growing up, I heard about what my dad and my mom, what they went through during World War II. And so I wasn't the typical kid. I remember.
Did he meet his mom before he came to America?
Yeah.
I mean,
they got
your
married.
mom.
He met her in Germany. He went into Germany after the war during the post-war recovery to get work, because if you could speak German and you were a man, they needed you to rebuild. And so his goal was to work there, save up enough money, and then come to the States. And that's when he met my mom, too. They got married over there and then came over here. Yeah.
Well, the only reason I wanted to bring this up, I think this is very meaningful today because we're going the other way now. And I feel bad for the older generation. I guess I'm kind of in that now. I'm 61, you're 62. But especially like people like your dad and Dr. Hiltebittel, who usually sits here, he's 73. It's got to be rough on that generation. He went to Vietnam. We still got World War II vets. I still meet him every now and then. And they got to be wondering what's happened to us. Yeah. This isn't the country that we fought for. We're going the other way now. We're going into socialism.
Yeah.
He came out of socialism and communism. Your dad did.
Exactly.
And
yeah, we're moving away from our Judeo-Christian ethic, which made this country the most prosperous nation in history. And we've abandoned all that, and for whatever reason are embracing socialism. And socialism, true socialism, no matter where it is in the world, always ends up being anti-Christian and anti-Jewish.
Yeah.
You can take that to the bank. You look at Venezuela right now, other places. It's hard for me to fathom that our younger generation is willing to throw away our freedoms and go after that. But it's taken years of indoctrination to get them to the point, and now unfortunately we're at that point where a whole nation, not a whole nation, but a good part of our nation is being deceived.
I mean, you even hear the Republicans in Congress when they talk about global warming. It's like they've all accepted this nonsense, this lie.
You know, Al Gore, decades ago, said that by such and such a date, I can't remember the exact date, but we're getting close to it, that the oceans would rise by 20 feet.
Yeah.
Well, so they've gone up, what, maybe 6 inches, something like that. I'd say that's a slight exaggeration, right?
Yeah.
Well, recently he was interviewed on NBC and kind of being congratulated, like, did you have any idea when you made a statement years ago that this would really happen, that we'd be this far along in this crisis? And I thought, you ought to call him out on what he actually did say. He was way off. You know, the oceans came up this little. He said they'd go up, 20 feet or more. The fact is, he's been way off. And not everything about global warming, if it's even taking place, and let's say it is in parts of the world, it's getting warmer. Some other parts, it's getting a little bit colder. But it's not all bad. We have friends in Canada, and they can grow food further north now than before. So, it balances out. It's not the end of the world.
It's a cycle that's been going on for centuries, and it will continue to go on. Like you say, we grew up in the 70s. It was global cooling then.
Well, and let me make this point. It's an important one. Hundreds of years ago, we faced global warming for a time and global cooling for a time. Hundreds of years ago, when we had less than 1 billion people on the planet, only a few hundred million, there were not enough people on the planet to even try to make the argument that humans caused it back then. They won't tell you that, even though they know that that's a fact.
Yeah.
We've gone through this before at a time when there weren't enough people that could have caused it. But now they're making the argument it's all because of humans on the planet. And meanwhile, the U.S. has actually on a per capita basis significantly reduced pollution over the last 30 or 40 years. But they're wanting more and more from us, forcing us into a socialist system. When China is getting away with so much pollution, you can't see across the street on some days. So clearly, again, it's an agenda, and it's a very deceptive one at
Something
that.
else to consider here, too, is where are the thermometers at? They're in the middle of these big cities filled with black tar and pavement.
Where it's hotter.
No wonder.
Yeah.
I mean,
And there are places in the world where it has actually gotten colder, and you never hear them talk about that.
No, it doesn't fit the agenda.
Yeah.
All right, well, let me just read a little bit, and we're going to tell the folks how to get your book, En Route to Global Occupation. You've written another book.
The New World Religion,
right. We're going to talk about this one on another show next week, The New World Religion. They can go to your website, Gary Kah, K-A-H, Rex will put that up, GaryKah.org, and they can get these books there. Let me just pick a paragraph here. Because of his background in government, Gary Kah was invited to join the WCPA, World Constitution and Parliament Association. Whew, that's a big word. That's a big paragraph there. Overseeing the planning and implementation of one world government. For the skeptical observer, the material in this book should serve as ample evidence that the drive to create a one world government is for real, including reproductions of the original WCPA documents. The author further demonstrates that there is an ominous cooperation between the globalists who are promoting the one world government and the New Age groups. And way back in the late 80s, you wrote this book, and yet it feels like we're reading something that was written yesterday.
Yeah, I wrote it in the 80s. It came out in the early 90s. And then it wasn't too long before things began happening on a more public stage. But still, all of this didn't come to the forefront in a major way until the last 10 or 12 years. And now, in the last year or two, things are just on fast forward. But as I mentioned earlier, I think, we have some actual documents in there. That was an organization I was invited to join. And for 4 years, I communicated with the Secretary General of the organization. And he sent me some of the documents, including a prototype copy of a world constitution for a world government, where they laid everything out, how they want to do this, which is still being tweaked. But after my book came out, I did something like 40 talk shows the first 2 months. And then they found out about it, that I talked about them in the book, and they were not very happy. I'll just say that. But at that point, what were they going to do? Because now it's been exposed and the word got out.
Did the WEF exist at that time?
No, the World Economic Forum. There was a group of people doing the same kind of stuff, but it wasn't under the heading of the World Economic Forum, under
what do you know about,
Klaus Schwab.
What do you know about him?
Klaus Schwab comes from, I believe, southern Germany. He's a globalist. I'm not going to judge his motives, but he believes that world government is the answer, and that the most powerful people in the world collaborating with him can help make this dream a reality. And so you've got this very powerful organization that has a lot of control over the global economy, pushing the current agenda that we're seeing unfold every day on the evening news. involving our health, the economy, politics. It's definitely moving us toward a type of socialism mixed with capitalism, but controlled by a fairly small group of people who think they know best.
Yeah.
And that's the deception. It's not straight socialism. It's got a capitalistic element, but you and I aren't going to have any say in that. It's these power brokers who are going to dictate.
And they're going to live in mansions, and everyone else going to just be peasants. That's what
Pretty
it is
much.
in every socialist country in the world.
Yeah, unfortunately. And a lot of those people beyond the World Economic Forum belong to various secret societies that have been pushing this agenda for years and years. So, and I write about that. I have 2 chapters in my book, which are almost straight quotes out of the books and writings of people in these secret societies. I give the page numbers of their books. If people don't believe me, they can try to get hold of the books themselves, look it up, and see that I'm telling the truth on that. Ultimately, it's a Luciferic agenda. Now, I'm not saying all the people pushing this are knowingly Luciferians or Satan worshipers. I'm not saying that.
It's just like the guy behind the curtain. There's a Satan, and he is pulling strings to bring about his agenda. Whether people even realize or believe in him,
That's right.
they're being used.
Yeah, you've got people down here who've just bought into part of this, and they're doing their part, thinking they're helping make the world a better place sometimes. And you've got people in the what I call the mid-level management positions that see part of the picture, but not all of it. And then you have a relatively few up here that know exactly where they want to take things.
Like the Masons. There's very few people that understand what's really behind the scene there.
Yeah, and I quote them in my book. On page 48 of The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, written by Manly P. Hall, who is one of the most prominent Freemasons of all time and a Masonic historian, he talks about Lucifer in a very favorable way on page 48, and you can read the quote in my book. And by the way, he would go into an altered state of consciousness, fancy term for a trance, and he would see things.
Yeah.
And then he was also an artist, and so he would actually do drawings of some of the things that he saw. I got a copy of one of his other books called The Secret Teachings of the Ages. I got it at a New Age bookstore years ago, and some of his artwork was in there. And it got to the point where I didn't even want it in our house anymore. I mean, it just gives you the willies just to see it. So he's basically receiving instructions from the other side, and even putting pictures in there of what these beings look like. And, of course, he passed several decades ago now. But it wasn't back in the 17 or 1800s that he was writing this stuff. It was in the 1900s, is fairly recently. And I'd say most people involved in these secret societies have no clue what ultimately is going on at the highest levels of this. They just see it as a brotherhood of business partners and people to help each other. And
Paul said, "To whomsoever you yield your members, to him you become servant to." Mm-hmm. You yield your eyes to Satan, and he'll take them. And we yield ourselves to him. And a lot of people get caught up and don't even realize what they're in until they get caught up in something.
It appeals to people who want to be very successful in this world, because if you belong to some of these groups, you have an instant business network. It's easier to make money and to climb up the ladder, and then you become dependent upon these networks.
What's sad to me is that there are Christians all over America. They're in a secret society. And I don't mean they're a Mason. I mean their Christianity is secret. Their people at work don't even know they're a Christian. Yeah. People don't know that you believe the Bible, that you read the Bible. They're Christian, but they're secret about it, and that's very. It
kind of sounds like being ashamed of the gospel, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
And that's something we ought never do. I mean, we need to be wise when we say what we do, where, and allow the Holy Spirit to guide us. But just to be silent all the time so that you can work next to people for years and they don't even know you're a believer, that is not of God. That's for sure.
Well, folks, we're gonna cut her off there. Don't forget our TV show that's coming up this week will not be on YouTube. That's why we've done 2 of these shows for YouTube with Brother Kah here, because I wanted the YouTube to still be out there. But the show, we're doing a very blunt, very shocking show. We're going to do 2 of them. He's thinking, when are we going to eat? We're going to eat when we get down, but it may be a while.
I'm not concerned about that.
I think his wife's packing her bag now, thinking, I'm getting out, I'm going to eat. But the TV show on CTN Christian Television Network, 7 o'clock Eastern Time every Friday, and Tuesday at 11 p.m. they replay the show. You can watch it there or go to Rumble. Everyone watching YouTube ought to go to Rumble, sign up for the Prophecy in the Spotlight, subscribe to the Prophecy in the Spotlight Rumble channel, and we're going to put the shows over there that can't be on here. Okay, and also don't forget, get his newsletter. Go to his website, Gary Kah, K-A-H, GaryKah.org. Sign up for his newsletter. Check out his books there if you don't have them. I don't think I've read the other book, but I know I highly recommend this one. But I'm sure they're both good. So go there and check out his website. He's got some other things on the website you can look at and watch and things like that. Don't forget, we have a brand new donation package just out, and a brand new little booklet on the, where is that thing? Here it is. The Mark of the Beast by Dr. Hilterbiddle, a little pamphlet that he just did, and one of Brother Hilterbiddle's DVDs and some other things. You can get that there. Well, okay, we're going to shut her off here, and we'll see you next time. Keep your eyes on the skies.